When I was a kid, the future was where it was at. I don't know if it was all those Apollo launches, maybe it was all the Tang I drank, or maybe it was those popular science films. You know, the ones where the narrator was always making big promises about the marvels of tomorrow?
With a push of a button, tomorrow's commuter will simply hop over pesky traffic jams via personal jetpacks.
Personal jetpack. There you go. Of course, what I was really hot for was one of those food synthesizers, you know, like they had on the Enterprise, right? But I used to wonder, what would you fuel that with? I mean, what could you put in there that would be that versatile? And then I get it. Tofu.
Formulated from that super legume of the future, glycine max.
Or to you and me, the soybean. I know, it's not high tech, but bear with me. I mean, besides a 95% digestibility rate, 8 essential amino acids, and all those health-trendy phytochemicals, tofu is a profoundly plastic proto-staple, as flexible as any old, spacely sprocket. So, join us, won't you, as we probe deep into the heart of a food that's got
the future
written all over it. Tofu. It may not be a giant leap for mankind, but it sure is good eats.
Let's meet tofu's parent, the soybean. The most nutritious and easily digested of the bean family. And with the possible exception of plankton, it is the world's most...
Whoa. Okay, that's enough. This is a half-hour show. Now, it's true. This little oilseed does lend itself to almost as many applications as maize, the only crop that outacres it in the U.S. And yet, Americans only eat 3% of their soy product, and that's just not right. Now, as far as our hero tofu goes, it all begins with dried, shelled soybeans, which are soaked overnight in water. The next day,
following a ritual as old as the Han Dynasty,
the beans are boiled, crushed, and then separated into a solid called okara and soy milk or extract. Now, various coagulants, such as calcium sulfate, a very pure form of gypsum, same stuff as in sheetrock,
the miracle building material of tomorrow,
are added to further separate the milk into curds and whey, much like in cheese making.
In fact, the soybean is often called the cow of China.
That's true. Okay, so the soy milk is then poured into molds where the carbohydrate-rich whey is allowed to drain off. Now, when the tofu sets, we find ourselves at a culinary crossroads. If it's cut as is, without pressing, a fine protein network is formed, trapping liquid in a creamy, soft, but relatively unporous block. Now, the jello-like texture and clean, soft flavor of this silken-style tofu goes over big in Japan, where it's a favorite summertime dessert. Now, if the tofu is pressed immediately following coagulation, the way that cheddar cheese is, water is forced out of the compacted curd, leaving a network of tiny openings. Now, since it contains less moisture, this firm-style tofu has a much higher nutrient content than, say, silken tofu. Now, although the differences in flavor are very subtle, the differences in texture greatly affect the way that tofu feels in the mouth or reacts to outside flavors. More on that shortly. Now, if you don't have a tofu master hanging around your neighborhood, do not despair. The future is here.
The Mega Mart of the future is a convenient and exotic world bazaar of sights and flavors.
The grand old 90s witnessed a high-speed head-on culinary collision between traditional Asian cuisine and traditional health store foods. As a result, just about every megamart in the country now has a soy or soya food section where you can pick up such delights as soy chips, soy milk, soy margarine, soy cheese, tofu pups, and of course, tofu, both regular tofu and silken tofu. But of course, the choices do not end there. Take, for instance, regular tofu. It almost always comes in two varieties, soft and firm. The main difference here being the amount of moisture that was squeezed out of the curds pre-packaging. The point is that where silken tofu is a lot like a slab of Jell-O, regular or Chinese tofu is a lot like a sponge. You see, even if you were to look at it with a microscope, the protein matrix of regular tofu would look just like this. And it also shares some other spongy characteristics. For one thing, it'll absorb whatever liquid that it's sitting in. And this is how we're going to take advantage of a very, very old Italian word, which means a dunk in the sea, or marinade. Of course, before we can marinate it, we've got to wring it out. Now, I'm going to go stomp all over Tokyo. Of course, the word marinade and the word brine share the same etymological roots, but there is a big difference in practice. You see, a brine really just refers to a salty liquid, but a marinade always includes acid, either citrus juice or vinegar, wine, something like that, in order to tenderize the proteins of tough cuts of meat. But here's the thing. Tofu's proteins are already coagulated, i.e. cooked. So tenderizing is not really an issue. However, flavor injection is. Of course, if we're going to consider this a sponge, we've got to wring it out good before we can expect it to soak up anything, right? Now, we could kind of squeeze it as one whole block, but it would take longer. So I like to cut it into portions. I'm going to fry this up in fours. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, we need something to soak up what comes out of it. Otherwise, it's just going to kind of sit there in its own juice. So you could use a tea towel or a dish towel or oh, that's probably a little fuzzy. I like to use paper towel. Stuff's really pretty darned absorbent. So just lay it out 2 and 2. Give it a little room. You do not want them touching. Fold it over in both directions so it's got plenty of room to soak. And then it would help to weigh this down with something so that we can really give it a good squeeze. And for that, I like just an ordinary sheet pan, baking sheet, cookie sheet, call it what you will. But that's pretty darn light. Hey, it's a piece of aluminum, so we need some weight. And nothing's better than, of course, a 28-ounce can of tomato, which I use for weight as much as I cook with them. So down for 1 hour. Now, as for the marinade, Asian flavors are the tradition, which, as far as I'm concerned, is a darn good reason to not use them. In fact, my very favorite is Worcestershire sauce in even proportion with sherry wine vinegar. Now, believe it or not, a $10 bottle of sherry wine vinegar will just about make you forget about that $100 bottle of balsamic vinegar. Okay, maybe not forget about it, but you get the point. We only need about 2 tablespoons of each. There we go. And the other thing that tofu likes, since it is just a little on the bland side, is some heat. So give it a few good dashes of your favorite pepper sauce. There you go. Now, all we have to do is wait an hour. Well, it's been an hour, and now our slabs not only possess high surface-to-mass ratios, but powerful thirsts. So a short soak in our marinade will be sufficient. As you can see, the paper towel is pretty darned wet. Just kind of tear it right off of there and move this directly to the marinade. Now, if this was a piece of meat, we'd be talking about hours. But again, this is going to be a very short time since these little guys are going to soak that up fast. So 15 minutes on this side and then 15 minutes on the other side, and that will be it. No need to refrigerate. Aside from subtle differences in flavor and texture, the biggest thing that separates silken tofu from its cousin, regular tofu, is this.
The amazing aseptic container keeps perishables fresh for months. No refrigeration needed. How is this possible?
Well, I'll tell you. You see, the hot soy milk and the coagulant are poured in and the carton is sealed before the tofu has a chance to set. Now, since it can't be pressed after the fact, regular tofu is not available in this packaging. Stunning versatility and a 3-month shelf life makes this a pantry must. But before we can show off its full potential, we need to visit a friend.
Today's blenders are chock full of forward-thinking design.
W. Fill in the blank. Lustrous salad dressings, rich smoothies, silky pie fillings.
Blends. What's in the cooler?
Oh, nothing. There sure are a lot to choose from. Any criteria?
Well, despite the trend towards multitasking, all you should really ask for in a good blender is liquefaction and aeration. The rest is just counter candy.
Oh, well, that means maximum food blade contact and high RPMs. Don't food processors do the same thing?
If they could, bartenders and soda jerks would be using them. Besides, ever tried to puree hot soup in a food processor?
Yeah, it's ugly.
Not to mention painful.
So, any suggestions?
Look for modeled with a tapered canister.
To promote food blade contact.
Wide range of speeds.
For the ultimate in texture control.
Simple, well-placed controls.
For ease of use and snappy cleanup.
And wide footprint.
For safe, incident-free operation.
Who is that?
Oh, it's just a narrator. All these future product shows have them. It's code.
Well, I don't like him.
Bye. Whew. Although I'm not about to advocate that you replace your Thanksgiving turkey with a big hunk of tofu, there are certainly some circumstances in which tofu can switch hit for some pretty major culinary players. For instance, since it's smooth and contains emulsifiers, silken tofu, when properly pulverized, is a perfectly acceptable replacement for the raw eggs in Caesar salad dressing. And unlike the traditional version, which is best built in a bowl, this one just screams blender. You think W would mind us? Of course not. Now, first, 2 ounces of cubed Parmesan cheese. You don't think this can be done in a blender? Well, actually, a blender is better than this, than even a food processor. The secret, when you're chopping up anything that's big, whether it be cheese or ice, is to start on the lowest setting that you've got. There we go. Now, as it slowly gets chopped into pieces, you'll notice that it's going to start settling into the bottom of the blender. That's when you can turn up the speed. Let them take their time. I'll get there. Go for 2 cloves of garlic and send them right down the chute. This is a great feature. There we go. Now, once that is all minced together, kill the blender. Well, turn it off. You get my point. Now we go with 2 tablespoons of Dijon mustard. Just scrape that right into the bottom. About half a tablespoon each of white wine vinegar and Worcestershire sauce. That is a teaspoon and a half of each. There we go. A pinch of kosher salt. A pinch of freshly ground black pepper. There we go. Now comes the tofu. We're going to need about half a block or 1 cup of tofu. And that goes with whatever liquid happens to seep out of it. And work this until it is smooth. Now, as soon as it's smooth, add 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. This is the time to break out the good stuff. And pour it right down the middle of the vortex, the little funnel, little tornado thing that's formed. And what you're looking for is basically salad dressing consistency. It may take a little less, a little more than 2 tablespoons. There we go. That's it. Now, you've got a Caesar salad dressing that will keep perfectly well in the refrigerator for up to 2 weeks. Of course, one of the true tests of a blender is how does it handle high viscosity substances? Well, I can't think of anything more high viscosity than pie filling. So, let's see how it handles 1 block, that's 2 cups of silken tofu, combined with 2 cups of chocolate chips, melted Art of Darkness style, along with 1/3 of a cup of coffee liqueur and a teaspoon of vanilla. Now, since the protein inside tofu tends to deaden the sweet flavor of mixtures like this, we're going to add a tablespoon of honey. There we go. Now, we'll see what this machine is made of. Because I can't help but notice that it doesn't have numbers, but it does have words like mix, chop, puree, liquefy. Oh, I like the sounds of that. Not bad. Now, all you have to do is pour this into a cookie crumb crust, refrigerate for a couple of hours, and hey, you've got a chocolate pie that's actually good for you. Next up, the bane of all blenders, big icy things. Well, this pricey little number seems to combine retro deco styling with Zen simple controls. See? Off, on, and really, really on. Wow, and an engine by Sopwith Camel. But can it handle the tall, tangy tofu thing? Let's see. It all starts with 1 small can of fruit cocktail and light syrup, frozen. To that we add 1 teaspoon of instant lemonade mix. Now you can use sugar-free or sugar in any kind of drink mix you want, or even Jell-O for that matter, just for a little tang and a little color. Then we go with 6 ounces of cranberry juice and 1 block of silken tofu. Now, we'll find out if this thing's all just looks. Of course, here's the test. Did it make a smoothie or did it make a chunky? Beautiful and brainy. Of course, this leads us to the final blender test, and that is ease of cleanup. Of course, I think maybe we should leave this one for W. I have to say that this little guy right here is probably my favorite. I like them both. You know, grilling, searing, sautéing would all be viable options for our tofu. But there's only one cooking method that I can think of that would not only lock in the flavor of the marinade, but bring on a whole nother layer of texture. And that is pan frying. So, here's the hardware. A nice big fat pile of paper towels, 2 containers suitable for dredging, 1 large skillet, preferably non-stick, over medium-high heat, 1 set of spring-loaded tongs, and a fork. The software, enough canola oil to cover the bottom of the pan by about 1/8 of an inch, 2 eggs, and half a cup of all-purpose flour. Oh, and kosher salt? We don't need any. There's plenty of salt already in the marinade. Speaking of the marinade, we need to get some of it off of the tofu before we can actually do anything else. So, take it out and just lay it right on more paper towels just to get the excess off of there. Once you've got that done, you can turn your attention to the eggs. The egg is going to act as a basic batter to coat and protect the tofu from invasion by hot oil. But unfortunately, the egg is wet, and even though we've given this a good blot, the tofu is still wet, so they're not going to stick to one another. It's kind of like a batter, the person, not the thing. Puts dirt on their hands to get a good grip on the bat. We've got to do the same thing here. That's where the flour comes in. By getting a small layer of flour on the tofu, the egg is going to be able to get a grip. Skip this step, and the egg will not hang. But there's a little bit of danger here, which is that you want the layer of flour to be as thin as possible. I mean, if you get a big old hunkin' layer of flour on there like this, the egg will stick here and then just peel off, leaving raw flour, which is not good eats. So you want the layer to be as thin as possible. So once you've dredged, knock off everything. Just kind of wiggle it around, get off as much as you can before sliding it into the egg. Just flip these over, and you can see the egg, a very, very thin layer of egg is perfectly stuck to the side of these. That's exactly what you want to see. There. Now, we're going to slide these gently into the hot oil. Do not splash them in or you will get a nasty burn. Just lay them right in like that. We're going to let these go for about 2 minutes or until they are, as they say in the restaurant business, GBD, golden brown, delicious. And that'll take about 2 minutes. Be very, very gentle here. Two minutes later, and the tofu is ready to roll. Just grab them with your tongs and gently flip. Don't use a spatula for this. You'll just flop them over and make a mess and burn anyone standing within, 5 feet of the cooktop.
There it is, friends, the food of the future today. Does it taste as delicious as it looks? You bet it does. But is it healthy?
Absolutely. Tofu is rich in antioxidants to help prevent several cancers such as colon, breast, prostate, and uterine. It's also rich in phytochemicals to help with hot flashes and PMS. Even the FDA agrees that a little as an ounce a day can help lower your risk of heart disease.
So it's delicious and healthy. But is it economical?
Pound for pound, the cheapest form of complete protein around.
while we're talking to the experts, what
I
about...
think that's probably enough for the experts, okay? Thank you. Thanks.
The soy galaxy may not be the final frontier, but it is ready and willing to feed us into the new century. As for tofu, well, just think of it as tomorrow's white meat today. Nutritious, versatile, good eats through and through. If you excuse me, I've got a shuttle to catch.